The US president has announced he'll stop attacks on Yemen. Donald Trump says he made the decision after an assurance by the Houthis they'll end their strikes on ships in the Red Sea. They had been targeting vessels after Israel launched its war on Gaza. But will Israel also stop its airstrikes? And what does this all mean for Yemen? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. Nearly half of Yemen's population faces severe food shortages. 19.5 million of them are in dire need of humanitarian assistance, and a large-scale famine is looming. Yemen's woes are almost never ending. Decades of instability and conflict have caused widespread devastation. The war on Gaza has only worsened the situation. The Houthis, who control large areas of Yemen, began attacking Israel. That conflict flared further when the US military targeted the Iran-backed group for attacking merchant ships and some US naval vessels in the Red Sea. The US strikes, which have increased since President Donald Trump took over in January, will now end, and the Houthis have agreed to stop striking at American ships. But this truce deal, mediated by Oman, does not relate to the Israeli offensive against the Houthis. So will the US ally also stop its attacks? What does this all mean for the acute humanitarian crisis facing Yemenis? We'll discuss all of these issues with our experts shortly. First, this report from Alex Baird.
For nearly 2 months, this has been a near-daily reality in Yemen. The US launched its latest military operation on March 15th, in response to Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. It's since carried out more than 1,000 airstrikes, killing hundreds of people. But that came to a dramatic end on Tuesday.
We had some very good news last night. The Houthis have announced that they are not, or they've announced to us at least, that they don't want to fight anymore. They just don't want to fight. And we will honor that. And we will stop the bombings. And they have capitulated, but more importantly, we will take their word. They say they will not be blowing up ships anymore.
But Yemen's Houthi rebels say that agreement does not include Israel. The group launched a missile attack on Israel's Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv on Sunday. Israel then targeted Yemen's main airport in the capital Sanaa and its main port at Hodeidah.
I have said many times that whoever attacks the state of Israel, their blood is on their own head. I said that the Houthi attack would not be met with a one-and-done strike, but with multiple blows.
The Houthis say their attacks are in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, as they suffer under Israel's relentless bombardment and 2-month blockade. And the group says its attacks are far from over.
We will work to impose a comprehensive aerial blockade on the Israeli enemy by repeatedly targeting airports, foremost among them Ben Gurion Airport. All international airlines are urged to take this into consideration and to cancel all flights to the airports of the criminal enemy to ensure the safety of their aircraft and passengers.
The attacks on Yemen have made things worse in a country already struggling with one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Since war broke out in 2014 between Yemen's Houthi rebels and the internationally recognized government, nearly 400,000 people have been killed. Around 4.5 million Yemenis are internally displaced. Most are women and children. Severe food shortages also affect nearly half the population, with more than half of all children under 5 suffering from acute malnutrition. And while American bombs may have stopped falling for now, for Yemen's civilians, there's little end in sight for their suffering. Alex Baird, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Well, let's meet our panel of guests to discuss all of this further. In Manama, Mesa Shurja Al-Din, a journalist and senior researcher at the Sanaa Center for Strategic Studies. In Manchester, in the UK, Ahmed Al-Ashwal, a political and military analyst. And in Washington, D.C., Nabil Khoury, a former US diplomat and former Deputy Chief of Mission for the United States in Yemen. All three of you, thank you very much for joining us here on Inside Story. Mesa, let me start with you. So, Donald Trump has announced a truce with the Houthis, brokered by Oman. But does this, in your view, mean any respite for the long-suffering people of Yemen? Because the Houthis are still pledging to attack Israel, and Israel is like to respond.
Trump's announcement last night solved one issue because we have two issues. The first, it is attacking the Red Sea, and the Houthis were very clear that they are going to stop this attacks. But the second issue, it is the attacks to Israel, and the Houthis were also very clear that they are going to continue these attacks. So this means that maybe the Israeli attacks will continue. And as we see the last few days, that the Israelis in their third wave or third round of strikes on Yemen, they always target the civilians or the infrastructure, nothing military. They never target the Houthis or their military sites. So this means that we are going maybe to witness more severe attacks this next few days. No one knows. And it means that still the Houthis in the category that, their involvement in Gaza war has definitely changed the perspective to the Houthis from a local actor to a regional actor. They have regional ambitions. They want to be an active member in the Iran's network or in the resistance, in the axis of resistance. So this has changed the attitude and the perspective to Yemen, and also the politics towards Yemen in general, the international politics.
Okay, let me bring in Nabil now to get a little bit of context, because Nabil, you, I know, have been watching developments in Yemen for many years. The civil war started in 2014, but the conflict, the turmoil, the war in the country goes back much further. In fact, when it comes to hardship for Yemenis, where do you start?
Well, it goes way back. I mean, Yemen has been one of the poorest countries in the world for a century. But in terms of modern civil wars, in fact, the first one started when I landed in Sanaa in 2004 between the government of Ali Abdullah Saleh and the Houthis. And that was a 6-year war. There was a respite, there was turmoil and chaos, and then the war with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates started. So there's been nothing but war for the past 25 years. The sad irony is that Yemen today, one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, and that's saying something given what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Gaza, is surrounded by two of the richest countries in the world, which have been heavily involved in its affairs for all its modern history. And it was recently bombarded by the largest economy and the strongest military in the world, the US, and one of the strongest militaries in the region and the world, Israel. So there is something totally wrong, totally unfair about what's going on. And the stoppage of the recent bombing by the US is to be welcomed. Anytime the bombs stop falling on civilian heads is a good thing, to be encouraged. However, Donald Trump is mainly interested in relieving pressure on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. He doesn't care about the internal conflict in Yemen. And given that sanctions by the US continue on Yemen, means that he doesn't care about the starving people in Yemen either. So I'm afraid, one good thing happened, fine, but we're far from resolving the crisis in Yemen.
Ahmed, we look at the UN estimates. They say 19.5 million people across Yemen need humanitarian assistance. That, compared with last year, is 1.3 million more people than last year. But break it down to a more human level for us, because I know you speak to Yemenis, to family and friends there. How bad is the situation? I ask you particularly for the most vulnerable, for women, children, the sick and the elderly.
Hello, James. So regarding to the humanitarian situation, so my family, they're still in Yemen. My friends, I was in Yemen until 2020. So I lived the hard days. I saw how day after day it comes, worse and worse. So as you said, the civilian war started 2015. Then the war with Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Houthis also supported the official government in 2015, March 2015. So the days started to go harder and harder. So now we are speaking about around 20 million people, which they are getting in poverty, which they need the most needs. So regarding to these things, it's starting now to get more worse without any solutions. If we can say to the UN numbers or the UN statistics about Yemen, you can see it is the most country which needs help. But when we see to Donald Trump and administrations regarding to the funds, to cut off the funds of the INGOs or the UN organization working on Yemen, which that means it will get the people to get worse and worse. And when we see there's not any economic solutions, there's not any organizer salaries, that we can't deport or import the fuel. Now we can speak about the airport, which the only path for the Yemeni from Sanaa, I mean, in the center of Sanaa, or which around them they can travel. So, for example, to Jordan for their illness people. Also, now we have Hodeidah is now out of service. So some of the goods and the fuel which they coming from this port and from this route now is blocked and is out of service.
Okay.
So
Ahmed, I'd like Mesa to pick up some of those points that you've made there about the recent military targets. And let's start, as Ahmed mentioned there, with Sanaa Airport. It has been bombed a number of times. The most recent attack seems to have been particularly devastating. How will this affect ordinary people, but also how will it affect the Houthis? Because that is what Israel says it's trying to hurt. Because remember, the Houthis were there during the war with the Saudis when the airport was effectively closed for 6 years. So it didn't bring down the Houthi regime, did it?
No, this time it's different. I mean, the airport now is not function anymore. The airstrikes before, it's around the airport. Sometimes it targets the airport, but it's not to the extent that it will not be function anymore. So it needs to rebuild the airport. Definitely, this will not affect the Houthis because they launch the missiles from other areas, not from the airport, and the airport always receive only UN planes, or flights come from Amman, Jordan, which is a very safe country. So it's for civilian service. Nothing is military in this airport, so nothing can justify this attack. And it means a lot for the Yemenis because for the sick people, for the old people, they have to travel for almost more than 12 hours to go to the nearest airport, which is in Aden. And it is a very hard journey after the war because of the checkpoints, because of the many blockades and roads, closure of the roads in Yemen.
And let's stop you there, Mesa, for a moment. And Ahmed, among the other targets, you briefly touched on it a moment ago, are the ports, particularly Hodeidah, which is the big port, but also the US. Israel's hit Hodeidah, as has the US, but Israel also hit Ras Isa port as well. And one assumes that this means that commercial shipments and humanitarian aid are going to be unable to get in, or certainly hindered by this, making the food situation even worse.
Yeah, so just before to answer to that one question, so the cost of the damage which has been done the last 24 hours regarding to Hodeidah port or the factories or the central electricity. So I didn't see anyone that mentioned about the central electricity stations, which has been targeted in Sanaa. So there were two central electricity stations have been targeted yesterday. So the south one is south of Sanaa, and the north one, which is the north of Sanaa, which they control the electricity of Sanaa, have been destroyed. So we are speaking estimation about $5 billion about this is the loss and about the damage for the airport, the destroying of the airport, and regarding of the Al Hodeidah ports and the factories, and also the electricities. So this is one who's going to take care, who's going to pay for it, who can build it, who can rebuild it. I don't think that anyone who's going to help. Only the Yemeni people, they will pay for it, and the famine will start to get over and over. Also, we are speaking now regarding to Sanaa Airport. So I think the Houthis that they mentioned this morning is going to be back to the surface after the 14 days as an emergency airport, not as official airport. So they are trying just to find ways for their own use, not to use it for civilians, as Mesa said, or for the UN. Just it's going to be as an emergency airport, this one. And regarding to targeting about Ras Isa. So Ras Isa, it was what we can say is the wealth of the Houthis. We can say like that ones. So this is why Israel targeted that ones in the first strike months ago, not just weeks ago, because they know this is the origin and this is the area which the Houthis, they got money from, where they got fuel and gas from, and which they can get a lot of revenue from. So they targeted for so many reasons. So we can target these people to make as a response for why they target in our cities. So we targeted this one because they got at least $500 million every month as a revenue from this port. We targeted this one to make explosions, to show the media inside Israel that we are making a real response. But in the end, who's going to be the victim?
Okay, let me bring Nabil back in, because I want to just look for a moment at the US bombing campaign on its own, because yes, there was bombing carried out by the Biden administration, but we've had a really intensive 6-week period of airstrikes carried out by the US. And I think most of the attention in the US media was on the start of this, and was the fact that those officials who were ordering it were using a commercial messaging app, Signal, and perhaps not as much emphasis on the scale of this bombing campaign, because the figures I have, $200 million in munitions just in the first 3 weeks. This went on for 6 weeks, and the Pentagon started to get worried that they would be running out of munitions and wouldn't have enough for the Asia-Pacific theatre in order to deter China.
That's correct. And that's one of the reasons that the bombing has stopped, because for all these specialized and heavy munitions that are given to Israel, when so many of them are used on Yemen, it does deplete the stockpile. And it takes a while for the American industry to catch up to that. But look, I mean, in addition to a colossal failure of diplomacy here, resorting to force when diplomacy could and should succeed. In addition to that, there is a very ambitious Israeli plan for the region, Yemen included, and the US is involved in that vision one way or another. And that vision is to change the power structure in the region. This explains in part why this bombing campaign on both the Israeli and American sides has been much more extensive than previous bombings under Biden or earlier than that. The Israelis have downgraded significantly Hezbollah in Lebanon. They are downgrading any military capability in Syria. They've certainly downgraded Hamas and are about to depopulate the entire Gaza Strip. They would like to do the same in Yemen. They would like to go after the leadership, decimate as much of the leadership as possible. In Yemen, it's going to be much more difficult for them to do because of the geography and because of the nature of the way the Houthis organize themselves and fight. But as I say, this is an ambitious plan. And even though the U.S. May stop bombing directly, but the U.S. is a full partner with Israel. When
Okay,
Israel
let me,
bombed, the US
Nabil,
did
if I
not
can
bomb.
bring Mesa in on that point. Both the US and Israel say they are targeting the Houthi leaderships. I think we can discount just by what we've seen in Gaza the idea that Israel specifically targets anyone. But with regard to the US, they say they were targeting Houthi commanders. Is that the case, or were there substantial civilian casualties? For example, I see that one of the attacks hit a detention centre which killed 68 African migrants, at least 68 African migrants who were there. Mesa.
I have to say that there are few information about the civilians and the number of the civilians who were killed in this campaign. And we talk about the U.S. campaign, it's more than 900 strikes since Biden, and it was very intensive during Trump in the last 6 weeks. But about the leadership, there is a kind of exaggeration, definitely. But there are some news and reports, and the Houthis they don't want to leak any information about that. But there are some reports about some military leaders that we don't know them actually, who are responsible on the missiles and manufacture the missiles in Yemen, mainly. But it's not something confirmed until now. And it's very difficult to verify this information. More than this or beyond this, no reporting or no information has been confirmed about military or significant leaders in the Houthis who were targeted in this.
Okay. Ahmed, in terms of the timing of this truce, only a truce, as we just said, between the US and the Houthis, and we don't know if it will hold. This was brokered by Oman. Oman is also the mediator between the US and Iran. Do you agree with Nabil? There's a regional dimension to all of this.
To be honest, yeah, as Mr. Nabil said. So it's not just Oman who wants to lead this mediation. Also Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, they didn't want to the situation to get worse and worse, and they refused if there is any movement on the ground, to be honest. So, and they pushed this agreement to be successful as it is. So even the vice president of Donald, Mr. Pence, what he said 4 days ago, so we just want this agreement to happen, and we do want them to target the shipments, and we will not do again. He didn't mention any support of Israel, and he didn't say that they have any plan of supporting the Yemeni government or anything. So let's go back 4 months ago. What Mohammed Abdel Salam said, who is the spokesperson of the Houthis, what he said, we are not enemies of Houthis. We will not target the U.S. shipments. We are not going to target any U.S. marines, submarines, or whatever it is. We are targeting anything related to Israel. So what's going on? That means since the beginning, there wasn't anything related between Houthis and Israel since Biden administration was on. But now the agreement is going to be on, and it's going to be successful. What I think on, because there wasn't any need to be airstrikes or to target the U.S. Ships on the Red Sea. Because
let me bring in Nabil for one more aspect of this, which is in just a few days, the US president is going to be visiting Saudi Arabia. As a former US official, do you think that's a factor in this, that those around the president wanted this truce in place? Because Riyadh, and he's going to be sitting down in Riyadh with Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, is within range of the Houthis. We know that. They've hit it several times before.
Yes, of course, this is a factor. Saudi Arabia made its agreement with the Houthis, mutual non-aggression, and Saudi Arabia would be very worried should the Houthis resume rockets on their oil installations. So they would much rather see calm and ceasefires inside Yemen with all sides. Trump is coming to Saudi Arabia for major new investments and perhaps a major announcement of a new agreement with Iran on the nuclear issue. So he doesn't want any distractions from those two big things that he would like to be able to announce. But in the end of the day, again, this is a respite. There is continuing competition between the UAE and Saudi Arabia inside Yemen, with each side pulling for the people that it supports inside Yemen. And that's not good. What should be happening, and Oman is to be thanked for all their efforts for peacemaking and mediation. Qatar could also help out. But what is Hans Grundberg of the UN is the only one who has been working tirelessly for a full peace agreement in Yemen to cover all the issues, internal and regional.
Let me pick that up with Mesa to end our discussion. Mesa, when Trump sits down with Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh, be honest with me, do you think there'll be any discussion at all about the plight of the Yemeni people and the future of Yemen? I think your answer might be somewhat depressing.
I'm not sure it's Yemen in the top priority for anyone. For the Washington, D.C., as I know from many people there, that although that Yemen is receiving all of this heavy strikes, it's not on one of the agenda. It's not in the agenda of the U.S. and not in its priority at all. And it's not even in the agenda of the U.S. Saudi Arabia. Maybe it's not in the agenda of the U.S. Saudi Arabia visit. Maybe it's not on the agenda of the U.S. or Iran talks. It should be one of this agenda, and it can be, and this can help in solving this problem, because I think Yemen should not be handled in that way. It's just a reaction or reacting to something emerged in Yemen. So we should be tough and military solution or security solution every time. It is the same way. There is no strategic approach to Yemen. There is no political approach to Yemen. And definitely there is no economic or humanitarian approach to Yemen.
So Yemen must not be forgotten. I get it. We will not forget it here on Al Jazeera. Thanks to our guests today, Mesa Shuja Al-Din, Ahmed Al-Ashwal and Nabil Khoury. And thanks to you too for watching. Remember, we produce this programme every day of the year, and you can watch it anytime you want on our website, aljazeera.com. If you have comments and suggestions, please go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or look for us on X at AJ Inside Story. I'll be back here in the same chair very soon. But from me, James Bays, and all the team, please keep yourself safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.